Hey everybody, I'm here with Carter Woetzel. Um, on Twitter, your bio says you're the lead researcher and economist for Shade Protocol, and Shade is a set of applications for decentralized finance incorporating privacy. And we'll get into Shade Protocol, but also we'll get into Secret Network, which is where the protocol is deployed. And Carter, you are one of the authors of the Secret White Paper. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Anything from your bio that I left out?
No, that's the thanks for having me on. That covers it pretty succinctly. It's been a 5-year journey, but that little Twitter description, I think that does justice at this current point.
All right. Well, I want to start off with just a couple of just straight yes or no questions, and then we'll get into the weeds a little bit later with Shade, Secret, what you guys have going on with partnerships and whatnot. So, first question, yes or no, is Silk Shade analogous to the relationship that we kind of came to know with UST and Luna? Is that the same type of mechanism?
No.
No. Okay. Um, Will regulation help or hurt secret network adoption?
Short term hurt, long term help.
Okay. And last question. Is your opinion, is there a good way to create an algorithmic stablecoin?
With over collateralization.
All right. Wanted to get those out of the way. Everyone that's watching this, most of my audience anyway, was involved with Terra at one point, right? Whether it be Anchor Protocol or just using UST to move around the
As was
Cosmos
I.
ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, same here, same here. But let's get some background on Secret Network for people that are not that familiar with it or not familiar with its kind of unique capabilities. What are the key features of Secret Network that people should know?
Yeah, absolutely. So since the inception of blockchain, we've been doing it since the beginning of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Everything is actually publicly visible on the blockchain. That means you can go on a block explorer. You can see, hey, address A sent money to address B, and they sent this much money. And the struggle with this type of setup is if we want to bridge back to our everyday lives, that's actually a security threat, right? Like if I have Bitcoin, I want to go buy a hot dog, and I go up to the vendor and make the exchange. If they're tech savvy enough, they could figure out how much money you have in your wallet. And even worse, they know every transaction you've made since the beginning of the creation of that wallet because
Right,
blockchain's immutable.
right.
So in some ways, privacy in Web3, because it's tied to finances, is even more important than privacy in Web2 because everything's immutable in Web3. And so Secret Network had a very simple vision back in 2016, 2017. It's can we design a blockchain where as builders we get granular control over what is and isn't transparent. If we're able to do that, app builders could build, a decentralized Uber, but where your location isn't publicly visible at every given moment. It means I could have a stable coin where I can actually go and interact with a vendor, just like when you swipe your credit card, the cashier register doesn't know how much money is in your bank account. And the key component, though, of course, comes back to compliance. If you have privacy in a black box, it's not going to work with sovereign nations. There's a whole set of risks tied to it. And so Secret Network, beyond just achieving privacy, also has something called viewing keys. What viewing keys do is they allow you to decrypt your own encrypted data, your own encrypted transactions, and you can actually hand off control of that viewing key to an auditor or a tax specialist. You can give off components of that viewing key to different entities and different people. And so over the long haul, Secret Network is super well positioned to be like Ethereum, but with data privacy and a path to compliance.
So,
Um,
so
yeah.
would you say that you know by default, if I send you money, you can't go back and look at every single one of my transactions, but I could through these keys let you see the last 10 transactions or the last
Yep.
60 days worth of transactions. Yeah, I think
Yep.
that's needed. The analogy with the hot dog vendor is perfect. You make a $1 transaction, this person can see your whole financial history, assuming that you've used mainly one address, right? And you know,
Yep.
the other option would be using multiple addresses, right? Or like, you know, I guess I have a friend who used paper wallets for the longest time when he was dealing with Bitcoin, and it never made sense to me. Never made sense. Um, so secret network, uh, you have the option to reveal what you want to reveal through these viewing keys. Um,
Mhm.
how difficult is it to use with the current wallet software that we have now?
Yeah, so the answer is the tooling continues to improve. It's very rough though. I think privacy is expensive, like computationally, some of this stuff, like on the network. And I think the user experience, we already exist in a Web3 world where there's a degree of complexity, right? So to add in privacy is kind of tough. And so one of the goals of Secret Network over the course of 2022, 2023, 2024 is continue to improve the infrastructure and the flexibility around viewing keys. There's actually a good friend of mine actually launched something called Crypto Clerk, and it's specifically for taxes tied to this privacy preserving network. And so infrastructure like that is like beautiful because they can take, your DEX transactions on Secret Network, all the trades you've made that are encrypted, and then go over here and spit out like, here's what you would hand in for taxes, right? And I think we'll continue to see, the taxation tooling get better. And like even for like troubleshooting and people wanting to be like, hey, I use this app, I don't quite understand what happened here. Someone be like, hey, can you send over this portion of your viewing key so I can help you like troubleshoot? Like some of that stuff's starting to improve as well. But long and short is privacy tech is computationally expensive. The user experience still has a long ways to go, but every year we continue to improve.
I mean, a lot of chains and a lot of protocols, they're going to have to improve their user experience. So it's not like Secret Network is all alone there.
Mhm.
You mentioned encryption. You mentioned privacy. How are they different, the two, or are they synonymous?
Yeah, so privacy is really like an attribute or a description. Like if I'm in a closed room with no windows, I have privacy from the outside world because people can't peer in and see what I'm doing. Right? That's like a fundamental attribute. Encryption is really like a verb. It's something that's applied to a set of data. You know, obfuscating it in a way that people on the outside world can't peer into that data and know what's going on there. So encryption achieves privacy, but there's many other ways to obtain privacy other than encryption, like in our everyday lives, technically. But within this kind of blockchain context and data, encryption is the way you achieve that. And Secret Network achieves this encryption by all the different nodes on the network run a specific set of hardware that not even the nodes can look inside of. It's called secure enclaves. And so that's where the encrypted data enters into. All the nodes compute, are able to decrypt within this safe environment, update kind of the database, able to update, that user takes an action on an app and something changes, right? That happens inside of the enclave, and then it spits it out. All the nodes on the network are able to compare to make sure their outputs are the same. Data security and privacy is secured, and users are able to interact with applications in really unique ways. So that's kind of how the encryption is achieved, is on the hardware level from all the nodes on the network.
Is it also? It's also built into the software level as well. So
Yes, has to be built into the
yeah,
the software level as well. Actually, Secret 2.0, there is a roadmap to continue to improve the privacy tech to try to combine the best components of hardware level encryption with your more purely mathematical, fully homeomorphic encryption that doesn't require any hardware. And the idea is actually the marriage of those two privacy technologies is probably the most flexible end state and the most secure end state. So privacy tech will only continue to improve. Secret Network was first to market in 2020, and there's still improvements to be had on the privacy tech. That's really a never-ending game of improvements.
so Shade protocol is built on Secret. Um, why don't you give just a general overview of Shade and what are the components?
For sure. So Shade Protocol, we saw this privacy tech and we said to ourselves, what could we do for the world if we're able to launch all of the key financial primitives but have this auditable privacy tied to it? And so when you think about the most important financial apps in the world of crypto, there's the primary ones is they're really verbs. I want the ability to trade. I want the ability to lend. I want the ability to store value in something that's stable and not volatile. I want to be able to move that money around safely from A to B, like in like a Venmo-like experience. So lending, trading, stability, and payments. Those were kind of the four key primitives that we wanted to tackle. And so Shade Protocol, as we're launching all these key DeFi primitives, all of the revenue from these different primitives go back to Shade, which is the governance and treasury token of the entire protocol. To date, we actually started with 2 power user products before we got to the more simplistic primitives. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's probably not worth running down that rabbit hole, but we technically already launched Secret Network's largest staking derivative product. It's also the second largest staking derivative in the entire cosmos, little known fact. We also launched the first bonds product in the entire cosmos. So anyone familiar with Olympus DAO, the ability for a decentralized treasury to sell its assets to the open market in a decentralized fashion. Those are known as bonds in crypto. It doesn't map very well one-to-one with like traditional bonds.
And that's live right now.
Live right now, already exists.
Right now.
So we've done staking derivative bonds, and then Q4, which we've just entered into October, Silk, the stablecoin, will be launching. Shade Lend will be launching. Shade Swap, the privacy-preserving decentralized exchange, will be launching. And then in the near horizon, Silk Pay, which is a Venmo-like experience for moving these different privacy-preserving assets around in a very safe way, will also be coming to market. So it's been a whole team. We're a year and a half plus into this vision, building away quietly, and like Q4 is our time to finally go to market with this vision for DeFi with privacy for everyday folks.
And I mean, and that's soon, right? Couple weeks, right?
Yeah. Well,
couple months at the most.
Q4. We're gonna say solidly Q4. The devs, I always like to say, like, we don't want to give a date until their hands are off the keyboards and they're like, all right, now we can go. But it will happen in Q4, whether it's the last day of Q4 or halfway through Q4 next week. That much is still up in the air.
Got it. All right. Let's talk about Silk. I was always under the impression that it was similar to, Luna and UST. I did use UST basically as my on and off ramp the entire time that I was dealing with Cosmos, and I was not heavily involved in Anchor Protocol, but I did see how that got completely upended. It happened really
Yep.
fast. A lot of people made a lot of money shorting Bitcoin, right? And you do mention in the white paper that that is one of the possible attacks that can happen with a stablecoin like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you give an overview of the difference between an algorithmic stablecoin, a collateralized stablecoin, and then where Silk fits in?
Sure, 100%. So I think it's important to start with like the purpose of a decentralized stablecoin. It really started with a simple problem in crypto was liquidity and stable assets. Back in 2016, 2017, you had Bitcoin, you had Ethereum. People were moving stuff around, but there was no like ERC20. There was no Ethereum version of like a token that was stable, and so that's when Tether came into fruition. Hey, there's this real world company issuing these digital dollar representations that supposedly can be redeemed back for real world dollars, right? That's what Tether was.
You could be the most amazing trader ever. You'd have nowhere to park your profits, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So that was Tether, and it solved a really big problem for the industry, which is liquidity, somewhere to park your money. But then as crypto enthusiasts, everyone looked at Tether and said, wait a second, this could be censorable. This isn't decentralized. We actually don't have proof of how big the reserves are. This whole system's quite opaque. Right. So even though the utility is there, what if we can do better? And that's where MakerDAO came in with a very simple model. They said, hey, we're going to have this lending protocol where people put up an over collateralized amount of value. They then can mint out a stable coin. And as those assets fluctuate in value, the stable coin that was issued will be kind of pulled out of the market and burned via those assets backing it. And MakerDAO worked super, super well. It has never depegged to date in a significant way. It's the largest decentralized stablecoin besides Frax. But it had a very significant problem, in my mind, a couple problems. So the first one is capital efficiency. It's really hard to grow a stable coin if for every dollar of it in circulation, there has to be, $150 worth of collateral backing it. This might be an inevitable constraint of existing in a programmatic environment. It might be the only way for us to guarantee the promise that something will stay pegged just to have over collateralization. I have hopes that over the course of the next decade, we will continue to be able to research and come up with better models. And one day we'll be able to improve capital efficiency, right? The second problem of DAI and MakerDAO was privacy. There's a complete lack of privacy tied to DAI, and that's actually really tough for commerce and bridging back to the real world. So this is where Terra came in as a third generation stablecoin. They didn't come in to solve the privacy problem. They came in and saw, hey, MakerDAO is not very capital efficient. Can we come up with a system where like the supply of the dollar stablecoin grows much more reflexively and faster in relation for demand of it? And can we have a system in that reflexive environment that kind of contracts rapid enough to maintain the stability of the system? And this worked pretty well, except that the system wasn't over. I'll list off a couple variables. Okay, the problems of Terra are as follows. First off, there was only one asset backing the system, and it was Luna. So it was a entirely volatile asset. So there's no diversification of collateral backing it, just one single type. The second piece was ultimately that Luna wasn't locked up in a smart contract that was really doing liquidations. There was algorithmic arbitrage players that had to be trusted to kind of manage changes in UST's price point.
Right. And all the while people are speculating on Luna, right? So,
exactly. Yeah. So during the event of a crash, some of those actors that were supposed to help support the system saw that it was breaking and kind of backed out, right? So it becomes kind of who wants to step in front of the train. If no one wants to step in front of the train, then everyone else who's holding the stablecoin kind of breaks. So no decentralized collateral. It was dependent on arbitrage players that may or may not back out in certain hostile environments. And those two pieces were really enough to, I mean, the third and final one I mentioned, and there's a lot of nuance here, was, they said for every one UST, so essentially you could burn $1 of Luna and mint out one UST worth of dollar, right? It was supposed to be kind of this one-to-one relationship. The problem with this is like, imagine you mint out, 100 UST when Luna was at, like 10. Okay, let me run it back. Luna's at $100. I'm a massive person trying to break the system. I burn a bunch of Luna. I mint out a crap ton of UST. Now, what happens when the price of Luna drops to say $50? You minted out UST when the system was expecting Luna to be $100, but because Luna dropped to $50, there's now a gap in the assets backing the debt that was issued. So a fundamental problem of Luna, the third and final one, is they let anyone mint out the stablecoin at any time. And so those threat actors knew that if they minted out a bunch of UST when Luna was like overpriced, and then once the price of Luna dropped, they could then sell all of that UST, and there was a fundamental gap in asset to liability matching. And so there's risks to permissionless minting, is I guess what I'm trying to say, as well as other two variables.
Got it. And when I read the Silk white paper originally, it was a couple months ago. This is addressed, right? There's a cap over a given amount of time.
Yep. So now I'll compare
and that's in the protocol, right? That's yeah.
I'll compare UST to Silk now. So biggest thing is Silk is starting with the over collateralized model. So just like MakerDAO did, we're copying what MakerDAO did, not reinventing the wheel. The system's over collateralized where people can put up, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Secret, Atom, a bunch of these layer one tokens. You put up an over collateralized amount, you mint out Silk. System has proven itself to date. And we also add on the privacy component. That's what is also very differentiated from Silk to DAI. Additionally, Silk is not targeting a $1 peg. It's actually targeting a price point that's an aggregate of a basket of global currencies and commodities. We didn't want to settle just to have another dollar stablecoin, especially in a volatile macro environment where the US dollar, we don't know where it's going to be in 10 years. Right now, it's doing really well, but there's no guarantees in the future. So if you hold Silk, you're actually hedged against inflation volatility. You have those privacy attributes, and it's backed by over collateralization using a protocol system like MakerDAO that has been proven out before. And so those three are all very big differentiations from UST and MakerDAO. In the future, Shade Protocol would like to implement more dynamic growth mechanisms, more similar to Frax. People have said Terra was approximately 20 to 30% collateralized. Frax is more 90 to 100% collateralized. They have like a dynamic system, but it happens in that much more collateralized range. So it's still fractional, but it's fractional much closer to 100% collateral backing. So Silk's targeting 150% collateralization out of the gates. And over the course of the next half decade, we slowly want to move the protocol to be more and more capital efficient, but only as it's proven to be safe, only as we've seen more data
Right.
emerge from other experiments. So
If
it's always about security and stability above all else.
so, the over collateralization is definitely, in my mind, the biggest difference between, you
Yep.
know, blockchain, DeFi, and the traditional finance world. Right? Traditional
Yep.
finance world, you basically, if you have a job, you could walk into a bank and they just give you money to buy real estate. Right? So
Yep.
that's basically what happens with blockchain and DeFi. You have to over collateralize these, whether it be a loan, or in this case it's you're getting a stable coin. But a lot of the collateral that you named, where it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, these are correlated in the market. If Bitcoin is dumping, everything's dumping even more. So what happens in that case? Let's maybe if you come up with an example using numbers.
100%. So in essence, there's four variables you have to look at when you're using an over collateralized model. There's bridge risk, smart contract risk, compressed volatility, and depth of liquidity. All right. So I'll go. The first two are pretty self-explanatory. If you're there's a vault that's allowed to mint out the stable coin. If the asset backing Silk is tied to a bridge that gets hacked, you have like bad debt incurred in the system because now there's Silk at large that isn't accounted for. Same with smart contract risk. If something gets hacked on a different chain for an asset like an ERC20, then it's bad, right? There's bad debt in the system, and most systems can handle some degree of bad debt, but there's obviously limits. There's very very real limits in a programmatic sense. So we'll talk about the other two because they're the most relevant and the most manageable. Compressed volatility. So in essence, let's say Bitcoin is trading at $100. We're gonna like use very simplified numbers here, and you minted out $50 worth of Silk. Okay, you have a 200% backing worth of value, right? Because you have $100 backing $50. Now, what happens is if Bitcoin suddenly drops to $50, it went from 200% backing to 100% backing. And what happens is the system programmatically has something called a loan to value ratio. And if you violate a certain principle, like, hey, I just dropped from 120% to 110%, I crossed some threshold, what happens is this vault programmatically takes the Bitcoin, turns to the open market and says, hey, I'm going to sell you this Bitcoin at a discount compared to the rest of the market. In return, you're going to give me Silk, right? The trade happens. The protocol now owns the Silk. Protocol burns the Silk. It has destroyed the debt, which in turn stabilizes the collateralization of the entire system. So in the Bitcoin example, started at 200. As it's dropping to like that $100, let's say at 150 bucks, system says, wait a second, you're violating the principle of 150% collateralization. We're going to take it, we're going to sell it, liquidate, do the whole system. Now, this is why compressed volatility is super important. That process takes a certain amount of time, anywhere from like 30 seconds to 5 minutes for the market to programmatically grab these uncorrelated discounted assets at an auction in order to turn in the stablecoin. And so we care about compressed volatility because if that drop goes from like $200, $100 Bitcoin to like $5 Bitcoin in like 10 seconds, then the system doesn't have time to like liquidate and pull Silk out of circulation. So that's like
Right.
one of the key risks, which is why when you're setting up these vaults, the quality of the asset is really, really important. That's why we look at compressed volatility. The final piece is depth of liquidity. If there's not enough like liquidity out in the market for the asset in the system, then you might go to the market and say, hey, give me Silk, but there's just not enough people in the system holding that other token that would be willing to turn it in to like stabilize the entire system. So those are the four attributes we care about as it pertains to over collateralization. It's not that there's no risk with an over collateralized system. The risks are still there. They're just significantly safer, and you can really map them out in advance in terms of the risk parameters. You can make it
Understood.
as safe as you want. It makes the lending experience worse because I could say I want to be 500% backed, but that means there's got to be $5 worth of value locked up in a vault in order to mint out $1 worth of the stablecoin, right? So
Right.
it's a capital efficiency trade-off.
I mean, it's very similar to staking tokens, and now you don't have tokens to actually do what you want with them, and
Hmm.
maybe that could bring us into the derivatives, right?
Hmm.
Um, what is the DApp called in Shade that deals with derivatives?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when you go to our site app.shadeprotocol.io, all of our product names are actually super simple names. So it's like swap, bonds, stake, governance. Like we don't want any like fancy name for each product. So technically, it's just Shade Protocol Staking Derivatives is like the app name. But the staking derivative we have is users on Secret Network, the L1 token, the token that's used for gas, governance, and staking, can be locked up in a smart contract. You mint out a staking derivative, and that staking derivative in the background has your stake collateral that's slowly getting auto compounded over time for you. And you can always redeem your liquid token that you can move around anywhere you want, which is the advantage of a staking derivative. You're not locked up and you can't do anything. You have a token, you can move around, do anything you want in DeFi. And in the background, it's still accruing staking rewards for you that you can always redeem for or sell on the open market. So that's kind of the advantage of a staking derivative. You're liquid, you can move it around and you're still accruing value.
And that's only within the on the secret blockchain, or will that eventually be, because with Cosmos, people that have been working with Cosmos for a while, it's really nice. You just bring your tokens over here, grab tokens, bring them over here, and you could, you know, there are also some blockchains that are accepting different, non-native assets to pay fees or to buy NFTs and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. So Secret Network just completed one of its big mainnet upgrades. And so the tokens on our network, the token standards called SNP20s, you can think of them as ERC20s version, but on Secret Network, but with privacy, can now be moved onto IBC and can be moved to different blockchains. So we actually just started a forum post on Osmosis to begin the process of setting up a staking derivative pool that has emission, like Osmo emissions going towards the pool would be the hope. And so we want to bring, it's called STKD secret, stake secret is the moniker for it. We definitely want it to go interchain. We wanted as many Cosmos blockchains as possible so that users, wherever you are, can acquire a staked position in Secret Network. And Shade Protocol benefits from it because a 0.25% of the fees go back to the Shade Protocol treasury. And that number, by the way, is the lowest fee in all of Cosmos on staking derivatives. Most people are charging anywhere from 3 to 5%. Lido charges 10%. We charge 0.25% because the thing we care about the most is bringing users back to the Shade Protocol set of primitives. And also, we believe this staking derivative is kind of a public good. So kind of trying to balance those two concepts compared to other staking derivatives.
All right, and you have a partnership with Stride.
Yes, so Stride is another staking derivative project. The cool part about Stride, like we're focused on the secret staking derivative side for our one derivative that we've launched, but they're trying to bring staking derivatives to the entire Cosmos. And specifically, one of their derivatives that they're going to be launching is ST Atom. So same concept, you're accruing Atom staking rewards, but you have a token that you can move around. And we want to bring ST Atom to ShadeSwap, to our decentralized exchange. We want to set up tools so users on Secret Network can acquire the Atom staking derivative. And the cool part about their staking derivative is it's also going to be used as collateral that where users can lock it up and they can mint out Silk. So that whole over collateralization lending process I was talking about earlier, the staking derivative will be one of the accepted assets. And the cool part about this is when you lock up your staking derivative in the lending product to mint out Silk, that staking derivative is still accruing staking rewards for you, right? So it's like when you mint out Silk, there's an interest fee you have to pay off in order to unlock your original collateral. That's how these lending products work. But this ends up being like a really interesting loop where you lock up the derivative, you're still earning passive revenue, potentially at a rate that's higher than what the interest fee is on the loan that you've just minted out. So this is where you get your DeFi degen strategies that spin up, and there's risk to that, which is why protocols, you have to decide how much Silk you want minted out against these specific vaults. So we'll be very careful on the risk management side, not to have it turn into like, oh, 80% of Silk is backed by a staking derivative where people are doing degen DeFi loops to like be super levered up on Atom in a long position. So like there's some risk management, but still like super cool use cases and proves the composability of like, oh, ST Atom came from a different chain onto Secret Network, onto our DEX. People can buy it, they can trade it, they can sell it, they can lend it. You can do all these really unique, interesting things. So huge fan of Stride and what they're doing.
So just to be clear, there'll be a limit on the amount of silk that could be minted based on like the total number of staking derivatives used as collateral, or on an individual basis.
So it's essentially like on an individual basis. The protocol has to decide, hey, we have like 8 to 10 vaults. How much silk will be allowed to be minted out against any of these assets at an over collateralized rate? And what I'm acknowledging here is like, hey, the staking derivative, it's a really cool vault. Also, probably want to be careful that it doesn't take up too much of the larger protocol wide asset backing of silk. So super excited about it. Just want to be cognizant of the risks.
Got it. And then the other dApps that you're launching, there's Shade Lend, right?
Yes. Yep.
And I'm guessing that's going to be some type of collateralized lending,
Mm-hmm.
similar in ratio, 150% or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, and actually the process that I've been describing of people like locking up collateral to mint out silk, that's actually Shade Blend. That's actually like the first version of Shade Blend.
Right, because I was
Um,
going to ask. It sounds the same, but what, you could borrow different assets, not just silk.
yes. So eventually, exactly. So
Got it.
that's the next iteration. And this is an alpha leak here. You're pulling the alpha out of me here. But yes, money market will be what's next post the initial version where you can only lock up collateral to mint out silk. Eventually, there'll be a lending and borrowing market for Cosmos assets.
I think that's the one thing that Cosmos is lacking, and probably a lot of ecosystems, right? These ecosystems, they're like, okay, we're going to set up our DEX, and then the DEX is set up. Like, oh, okay, trade, but the purpose of DeFi is just not to keep swapping tokens back and forth. You need traditional banking services as well, which is
Yep.
when I think of banks, I think of, oh, they give loans, and yeah, I think this will, especially when there are multiple stable coins within Cosmos, and these derivatives are when they're ready and people can use them. Like you said, some people, they're gonna lever up a little bit. It's not the same as going on Kraken and getting like 50x leverage
Yep.
for a trade, but yeah, you could definitely degen a little bit with the staking derivatives, and then the lending to me is, yeah, I've been wanting to see this in action, and I know the only other popular lending protocol I could think of is Aave, and
Mhm.
I I know
Here's
that
the cool part,
Udi's
Joe.
coin.
I'll take it next
Go
level
ahead.
here because all this stuff actually is on the near horizon. So on Ethereum, the liquidation price points are publicly visible. So the system knows, hey, if ETH drops to
Okay,
$1,000, I'm going to liquidate this user.
right,
It's all
and then
publicly
it becomes
visible
like a war of trades, right? These are,
because whales try to
yeah,
move price to try to trigger cascading liquidations to guarantee profits. And so Shade Protocol, this is why privacy matters. You add privacy to a lending product. As a small retail person, no one knows your liquidation price point. No whale
right,
can come and hunt you. And actually, for the whales too, they don't have to worry about another whale hunting their lending position. So this is why we say privacy is equitable. It's layer zero of blockchain as information. And we decided that total transparency is a feature, which it is in certain situations, but it's also a bug. And so by building these DeFi primitives like Lend with default privacy, we're simply bringing parity back to the Web2 financial ecosystem in
right.
Web3. And it's going
Let
to
me
be
let me
so
just
obvious. Why
let, let
would
me
you ever go back to a, you know what I'm saying? It's yeah.
let me just like walk myself through this. So on Ethereum, let's say there are a bunch of people that took loans and they're all roughly the same liquidation price. Someone else can see this clearly on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, they can cause a cascade of liquidations, short whatever the asset is in the process, right? Um, and this will be impossible or next to impossible on Shade just because of the built-in
Because the built-in
privacy
privacy,
features.
that information isn't there. It's completely encrypted. There's total even playing field between retail and institutional players. There's no asymmetry of information. Also, the DEX shade swap completely front running resistant because the mempool is encrypted. There's no one that can look. Hey, Joe's about to buy this asset. I'm going to shove a transaction in front of it, buy, sell, and earn money and make Joe pay more money. Minor extractable value, non-existent. And you have all these people over engineering. Oh, how do we solve for front running on a transparent blockchain? And it's like the answer is you build privacy into the base layer. That's
What
the solution. You can try to over engineer solutions. Oh, people are selling and bidding different MEV blocks and people, and it's like no, you just need privacy. That's the attribute that we need in this world of blockchain and DeFi.
why do you think that this hasn't been a big issue prior? Is it because this front running is only really skimming fractions of percents off of each transaction? Is that why?
Well, I think on the lending side, it's becoming a larger one. Like even during
Yeah.
like Three Arrows Capital and Voyager, everyone's watching these massive players' positions, um, and I think like institutions will not be able to play ball fully into Web3. That liquidity, those bridges to the legacy system, won't exist until there's a degree of financial privacy. And I think to your point, like minor extractable value, in the beginning, it was worth 10, 20, 30 million. Now it's worth billions of dollars as an industry, minor extractable value being literally pulled out of the hands of retail investors. And there's an argument to be made of like, oh, well, people don't really notice it in their exchanges, their trades, so they're okay with it. But like my answer to that is like, but why? Why shouldn't we want to make the most
Yeah.
fair system there is that respects people's right to privacy, that protects their finances? And I know whales, and like the larger the player you are, technically the more privacy matters to you. But the cool part about privacy is it flattens the entire playing field for everyone, regardless of how big of a financial player you are.
Is
It's
front
equitable.
running an issue on order book decks is the same as AMMs, or is it mainly on one style of decks?
I mean, essentially every blockchain, there's a block, there's a set of transactions. Someone gets to determine the order of those transactions, and if people determining the order of the transactions have access to information that they can earn profit by reordering the transactions, they'll do it.
Correct. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So every
They
totally
should.
transparent blockchain, wherever you are, that has validators, they will collude and they will do stuff like this because it's profitable. It's capitalism. It's part of the game. You can't
Right.
stop these types of things. The way you stop it is by baking attributes into the blockchain itself. What I like to say is the whole point of blockchain is to say I can't do that instead of saying I won't do that. I can't do it. I won't, I can't. It's physically impossible. That should be what we aspire to. Just like Bitcoin aspire to censorship resistance, it can't
Yeah.
be taken down is the dream.
I think the front running resistance is going to be definitely attractive to people coming from traditional finance, right? I and I think for the smaller user now, it's just one more thing they're aware of that's happening when they're doing these seemingly simple transactions, whether it be osmosis or some of the order book dexes that
Mhm.
that we're getting or have recently got.
And even if like we're also designing Silk Pay and like Silk as a token, like even if our goal is like even if a user never touches ShadeSwap or the lending product, we want to bridge Silk back to everyday commerce, right? We want to bridge this back to small businesses. We want to bridge this back to different countries, and you need that privacy for security reasons. So even if people don't care about the DeFi primitives, at a minimum, we're bringing a stable coin to the world that isn't pegged to a single global currency, as a hedge against inflation and volatility, and has privacy and security. That is huge. So, and it has a path to auditability and compliance. It's all part of the end game.
All right, I did see a little bit of discussion on Twitter about regulations, and I asked a basic question in the beginning. What kind of regulation do you see realistically in the next year or two, right? Um, Helping Secret Network or Shade, or hurting their chances of kind of growth?
Sure. So I think when we look at the history of encryption, like back in the 1980s, 1990s with Berkeley, for a while there were certain types of encryption that were considered illegal, right? Essentially, the U.S. government said, "Hey, this math is illegal," right? The problem with the internet is once these things get widely distributed out into the public and actually start serving the public good, it becomes very difficult to go binary, black and white. This thing is bad because there's enough consumers, enough companies, enough people using it that say, "Hey, I actually use privacy because I want to be able to pay my employee and not have my other employees know what I'm paying on chain to this person," right? I use this in my business. There's actual utility here. I'm not some negative actor behind these things. So the long and short is, I think there's a history in the US of once privacy gets distributed or encryption gets distributed to enough people and there's enough utility that it's like impossible to regulate the wrong word. There's just enough advocates of it that we're actually able to create good legislation and good frameworks around these things. I don't think privacy tech and blockchain has been distributed enough for that to be the case. We saw what happened with Tornado Cash. And now there's large institutions like Coinbase, Brian Armstrong that are standing up and being like, actually, this could be an earmark moment for our entire industry. And so even though this tech is not widely distributed enough that you're getting thousands of calls from everyday people, even though those people don't exist, because Tornado Cash in this little vacuum we live in is still so very small as it pertains to our everyday lives. Even though that's the case, we're going to stand up and we're actually going to challenge this. We're going to challenge this precedent for the sake of our industry. And so I think in the short term, privacy projects are going to continue to get a bad rap. I think it's like low-hanging fruit for regulators to try to paint components of the industry. And some of it's true. Some of it's true, right? This is Wild West. There are these negative things that happen. But I think by that same token, there's the flip side of the coin of people that see the power and importance of privacy in our own financial lives in Web 2. And we simply want to bring parity to that in Web 3. And we will work with regulators to build compliance frameworks on top of these privacy networks that allow for everyone to play ball together in this world. The difficult part about privacy is that privacy and sovereignty are intimately tied together. And by that, I mean, I have the choice to give someone my viewing key. Governments tend to be like, I want you to have privacy, but not sovereignty. Right. And that is technically the final battleground that privacy projects have to choose to fight. Are you going to give up the sovereignty component in the name of compliance? For Shade Protocol, ultimately, I believe our answer is we want to build the tools and the tech, and then we want people to build KYC, AML compliance platforms on top of all these financial products. And so then all the users get to choose. You can choose to go be on that platform, interact with this private DeFi, but still have, you gave up some of your sovereignty, but you have your privacy respected. You have all these primitives and you have a path to total compliance. Simultaneously, I think it's important to maintain the Wild West piece of, hey, you don't have to be on that compliance platform. We respect your right to sovereignty as a crypto user, as a wallet user. And I think I see a world where both of them get built out. We'll see where our industry goes. We'll see where regulators go with how they treat the attributes of privacy and sovereignty. But I believe that holistically, both attributes are extremely important to pushing Web3 to that end state that we're all here for, and you have to be willing to plant the flag and do the battle to the best you can. Simultaneously, you have to give routes to compliance. So that's my macro view of it.
And so with more adoption, you think that the legislation will just be more sensible overall, right? So it's one of those things where it's better to get the tech out there, have more people using it versus what institutions are doing now, just sitting around waiting for regulation, it seems like, right? For Bitcoin anyway. Got it. All right.
Absolutely.
What do you think secret network is missing right now that, if added, can kind of push them forward? Because I do see lots of advocates for secret. I rarely see anything negative about secret. That's just my Twitter feed. For your opinion, you're kind of an insider here. I'm not. What are they missing? What do they need, or what's coming that's going to kind of put them into more of the conversation, I guess?
It's a great question, and there's many answers because there's many problems in any ecosystem. I've always believed that the prioritization of the developer user experience is probably Secret Network's biggest problem right now. In a world where a blockchain developer can go build anywhere and be on the forefront of this amazing industry, why should you come build on Secret Network? Well, the answer is privacy. But just because there's a compelling reason to come doesn't mean that onboarding experience is super easy. Privacy tech is kind of complicated. Building with smart contracts we have additional degree of complexity. So I think Secret Network needs to do a better job of hosting hackathons and having that onboarding experience be as friendly as possible, where it's like privacy tech doesn't have to be intimidated to come build on it. But right now, to a degree, I think it is. And once you're able to get over that friction, then you start to have more apps. And when you have more apps, then there's more things for people to use. And when there's more people to use, energy starts to get, and eyes and attention and users get focused on the ecosystem. And that's how you build a thriving ecosystem. That's how you build commerce ultimately. And I know that the tooling on Secret Network over the last 2 years has improved a lot. So for front-end developers to build a website that talks to Secret Network as a blockchain, that's improved drastically. People actually coding the smart contracts. There's so many more examples out there now. And I've seen the growth the last 2 years. I wish the growth would have happened sooner. But tech is hard. Nothing comes easy. So developer experience, I think the privacy tech has to continue to push the forefront. And I think some of the stuff that's going to be coming out Q4, Q1, 2022, 2023, that hasn't even been announced yet, I think is like definitely on the right path. And then I think specifically the DeFi side, I think the secret networks really struggled with liquidity. And that's why Shade Protocol is here. We're here to solve the liquidity problem that exists in private DeFi. And I think if we can solve for a baseline 30, 40 million in TVL, we're going to see a renaissance in privacy preserving DeFi. And once you go private by default, there's no reason to go back, assuming liquidity is on parity with a transparent chain. So because it's just a better feature set. So that's the end game thesis. We're on the right tech stack. It's just pulling in the liquidity and going from there. So,
All right, I have one more question. And the question is, I don't have a tech background. Most of the viewers probably don't have a tech background. What can we still get out of your book, which is on Amazon?
oh yeah. So from 2017 to 2020, I spent 3 years writing and researching a book called "Building Confidence in Blockchain: Investing in Cryptocurrency and a Decentralized Future." I was there during the 2017 bull run. I met a lot of people that didn't have baseline financial principles. So at the same time, I was also meeting people like my parents, grandparents, friends of friends that they didn't understand the tech. It's like, what's this blockchain? Like, what does that word even mean? Like,
Can't blame them.
how does this stuff work? It was like magic. And so I spent 3 years writing a book that was really a synthesis of how can I explain this technology in a way that your mom and dad can understand, and how can I also teach some like basic financial principles and properly outline just how volatile and how much risk exists in this space, because a lot of people act like there isn't a lot of risk. And so we want to know what does it mean to acknowledge those risks but still invest safely. What does it mean to have crypto a part of a larger portfolio? Probably only like 2 to 5% max. You're still probably crazy if that's the case. But some of these like don't invest more than you can afford to lose, all those types of things. And I also noticed in 2017, I read like every crypto book I could find. And I was like, man, people are just like typing these things up in 1 month and just like spitting it out there. So like the quality of literature is terrible. And I had written like 60 pages of notes. And I'm like, wait a second. Like, I think I need to go write this thing. I want to go educate people. I want to be part of helping this industry. So feel free to check it out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble online. You can get it on Kindle, all that fun stuff. It's funny because the book already starts to feel dated because it was published in 2020. 2 years later, I'm like, wow, like proof of stake in that book did not have a huge role. If I rewrote the book now, proof of stake, staking, passive income
Right.
would be way more elaborated on, but it still teaches really good fundamental principles about like what blockchain is solving, why it's valuable, and how to safely approach investing in it. So if you're interested in those things, feel free to check it out.
Sounds good. I'll definitely check it out. Thanks so much, man, for taking the time and having this conversation. People are definitely going to like this video, and it's definitely nice to get more information out there about Secret Network. It's just one of those chains where it's like I can't believe it hasn't blown up yet. Well, with more things coming, like you said, down market, maybe it's a good time to you know grind out some products and some onboarding of developers and a couple of fancy UIs that are easy to use for people like me. You never know.
100%. And Joe, really appreciate you taking the time. And for anyone watching this, be sure to like and subscribe and support this guy. Like content creators in this space don't get enough credit for helping tell the stories of these founders, these builders, these protocols, and helping bridge it to everyday people. So be sure to support him on his journey as a content creator. I know it means the world to him, and just commenting that you enjoyed this. It goes a really long way for us people, especially in the bear market, putting our hearts and souls in. So
Well,
thank you, Joe.
appreciate it. And it sounds like in a couple months after those apps roll out, we got to do a follow up.
Definitely, 100%. And actually, that follow up we can do like you pull it up on your screen and you play around with it. You actually get to like touch it. You get to feel it.
All right. I'm in.
That
I'm
would
in.
be, yeah.
Thanks so much, man.
100%. Have a wonderful day.